Hey everybody, I am Brandon Lee, and this is Tom Burton, and you probably know us from Social Selling for Newbies. And today we are putting this together because we get asked this question quite a bit about, what is the difference between a lead and healthy connections? And so, Tom, we're going to have this discussion today, aren't we?
Lead versus healthy connection. Yes, we are. We are. We're going to have that discussion, and I think for us to kick it off, let's talk about what is traditionally a lead in the B2B world, right? And a lead in the B2B world is generally, you hear the word MQL or marketing qualified lead, and again, traditionally in the B2B world, it may be somebody who downloads something from your website, could be somebody who comes to a trade show, um, whatever the case may be, right? But it's somebody who, for one reason or another, engaged with your company and had some interest in your content or what you're doing or all of that kind of stuff. Now, there may not be any intent to buy what you sell, right? There may not be any interest really in even what you do or even know what you
Mhm.
do, but they've expressed an interest generally in either some of your content or, like I said, maybe they came to your trade show booth and stopped by or things along those lines. So
It
very broad.
reminds me of the story I like to tell about Salesforce. Now, I love Salesforce. I'm not going to be a Salesforce client. It's just not the type of tool, not the CRM that I'll ever use, but I
Yeah.
love their content.
Yeah.
And I do a lot of research. But what I find is that every time I download something from Salesforce website, I literally pull my watch out and I look
Yeah.
because it's generally within a minute,
Yeah.
my phone rings.
Yeah.
And now in their landing pages, I don't even need to give them my phone number. I just put in my name and email, and
Yeah. Yeah.
my phone rings, and I feel horrible for the poor BDRs. And I used to just not answer, not answer. And they would call me 8, 10, 12, 15 times
Yeah.
and leave messages. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what a miserable job. And now I download something and I just answer and go, hey, look, I'm just downloading. I'm just researching. Appreciate you. Take me off your list. But that's kind of the lead
Yeah.
experience that people are having these days, right?
Well, and yeah, absolutely. And the funny thing is that you're not a lead,
Right. And that's my
right?
point. I'm not a
Right.
lead. I'm never going to be
Right.
a lead. I'm
Right.
not an ICP.
Right. Right. So you're not a lead, you're interested in some content, but then it's being interpreted as a lead. And
Mhm.
therefore the experience obviously starts off all on the wrong foot
Yeah.
right to begin with.
Yeah.
And that what you just experienced, right, is very common, especially in the tech world, in
Hmm.
B2B sales, is okay, somebody was interested in something we had on our website. So therefore, there's a big leap that there's a logical chance or there's a reasonable chance that they're interested in our product or whatever we're selling.
Yeah.
And that's a big chasm,
Yeah.
especially, when you're putting out thought leadership content or other content
Hmm.
that has very little to do with your product.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I mean, here's another story. I was training a team, and I joined their meeting at, partway through the meeting. I joined the Zoom, and one of the marketers was still finishing up and talking. And so I just sat and listened while I waited my turn to do some training. And she said, okay, well, everybody, they had such and such trade show last weekend. And so you're going to get today all these leads put into your CRM, and you're going to have tasks assigned to you either today or tomorrow. So be ready for them. And all the, salespeople are like, okay. Then the marketer left, and I was, they were bringing me on to do some training. And the manager said, okay, hey, we got that. And they start talking about how they're like, and it was because they're having this conversation. I just got to
Right.
listen. Like,
Right.
those are not good leads. Now we got to put them through the cadence. I'm going to have to call these people like
Right. Well,
15 times,
it's
and it's not going to
demoralizing,
go
right?
anywhere.
It's
Right.
demoralizing. It's not productive. And even trade show leads, I'm going to call them trade show leads in
I
air
love that.
quotes.
Leads.
Yeah, is yeah, there are legitimate leads for sure that come to a booth in a trade show. There's no doubt
Yeah.
about that. But the majority of them, especially when you put the candy out there and the other they're not
Yeah.
there. And in fact,
Do you
people
want a
running
free,
around.
you want a free
Right.
pin? Let me scan
Exactly.
your badge.
Exactly.
Leads.
Right.
Yay.
And when you think about it, how ludicrous it is,
Right.
right? But yet I would say many, I won't go most, but probably
Mhm.
most B2B marketing organizations are generally measured on leads as we're talking about them here.
Right. Right.
And more and more so, right? The lead has very little to do with an intent to actually be interested in the product or have any demand for your product or service
Right.
along the way.
Yeah.
And
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 sorry.
I'll just say one more thing on that is you look at like the SDR, the BDR example you gave with Salesforce, that's expensive. I mean, just think
Mhm.
about, probably collectively by all the phone calls you got just from that one download, probably, I don't know, half hour, an hour of somebody's time, not
Right.
to mention their attention. I mean, that starts to add up really,
Yep.
really quickly,
Well,
in terms of
it's
expense.
their time, their pay, their
Right,
benefits, their
right,
training,
right.
their tools, and all of that. And then as we've just gone through these massive layoffs around it, it's like, well, if the BDR model was so valuable, why are we laying all these people off?
Yeah,
Because it doesn't ROI. And I think the other piece I would say too is just the overall cold lead, which I think is another lead with the air quotes. And it reminds me of the story I had with the gentleman, a CEO of a company out of the UK, and I know you know this story, and I loved it because he saw our show one time, and he and I were engaging. We get on a call, and he's like, "Oh, I love your story," and he's like, "I got to tell you my story." It's great. What is it? Successful guy had sold a company. A few years later, started a new company and went back to doing what you do. He went out and bought List and hired two salespeople, put them in place, and had a CRM and gave them phones and had email sequences and pat them on the butt and off they go. And then in like 4 months, he fired both of them and hired two new guys and put them in place because I hired bad sales guys. Let's go get new sales guys. And then he was getting frustrated with them. And he said literally he had a phone call come in on his phone and he looked and he just put it to voicemail because it was an unknown caller.
yeah.
And it was a time that he kind of like did that, I wish I could have had a V8 thing. And he said, it was then that I realized that I created a sales outreach system to sell completely opposite of the way I buy.
Right.
It's like when I want to look for something, I go to LinkedIn and I do some research, or I go to LinkedIn and I ask my network, what do you think? Who do you know? I go do a Google search. But he's like, I don't answer cold calls, and I jack up my spam, my spam score because I don't want emails coming into me. I don't have time to deal with stuff that I
Sure.
don't want to know about right
Yeah.
now. And that's the other lead that I know of. Are we missing any leads
No,
before we
I
talk
think so.
about?
You've got different. You got cold. I'm going to call them cold leads, which is what you're
Mhm.
talking about. Somebody bought a list, right?
Right.
That's like the worst. That's the extreme on one end.
But it's still common,
Oh, very
right?
common, very
Like,
common, very
I
common.
mean, I just had somebody ask me the other day, he's like, hey, Brandon, who do you know that sells list? We need to go buy a list
Right,
for blah, blah, blah. And I
right.
was like,
Or they use Zoom Info, or they even use
right.
Sales Navigator to some degree, right? And they'll
Yeah.
just get cold people that they think fit the profile, and
Mhm.
they go from there. So we'll call it the one category is cold leads, just like that.
Yeah.
Then the next category, which the world calls marketing qualified leads, which is where there's been some I've raised my hand for your
Mhm.
content or trade show or like we talked about. And
Mhm.
then there's
I
what
got
I
my free
call
pin.
the free pen, right?
I'm a
Then there's
lead.
what I call there are legitimate leads
Yeah.
where there are people that are genuinely have some interest in your product. What's the only time that so let me back up. You know what the stats are for the MQL, the marketing qualified lead, and those cold leads are generally now?
What is it?
1 out of 1,000 will actually even turn into an opportunity, not a
That's just an
sale, but
opportunity.
an opportunity. 1 out of 1,000 is generally what's happening now in the B2B world.
Wow.
Now, that
That's
said,
expensive.
that's expense. That said, if you're in a business, which I call like a 911 emergency business, like what happened recently with the Silicon Valley Bank, there were a lot of people, a lot of other financing companies that went out to people that were affected by that and were like, 911, we can help you right now. okay, sometimes those are actually going to be
Right.
reasonably, like if you need a plumber and a plumber calls you right now, you might pick up the phone or follow up on the email,
Right.
right? It's a 911
Yeah.
situation, your product or service. Okay, that's fine in that
But
situation.
a lot of that's luck with timing, right?
Well, timing, or if you just have a 911 type product,
Fair
right?
enough.
But you're right. But you're right. It's timing, or it's like a extreme painful need at that exact point. But 99% of businesses and the products that we sell don't fit in that category.
Right. Right.
So if you are in a company that has that type of product and that type of situation, then hallelujah, great.
Yeah.
But for the rest of us, we don't have that type of product. Most of our products are more vitamins than they are painkillers. So we have to create demand. We have to do all of the things that we have to go through. So cold outreach and the lead that we just talked about, as you
Yeah.
said, it's not only is it ineffective, it's completely unaffordable,
Yeah.
especially now. So how does that
So
compare to healthy connection?
yeah, I feel like the game show guy. So Tom,
So, so
tell them what they should do.
right. Um, Well, and I think this is what's really interesting, right? Look at the amount of time that's going into what we just talked about, dealing with leads.
Mhm.
And I mean, time and money. Now, let's say if you take that time and money and you focus on getting healthy connections. Stop right there. Don't even worry if they turn into an opportunity. Don't even worry if they turn into a customer, right? All you're trying to do is get a healthy connection.
Yeah.
And a healthy connection is, Brandon,
Yes, a healthy connection is somebody you have a high probability they will want to have a conversation with you.
yes, about anything, right? About
But yeah,
business or personal or professional or whatever, but you've built
yep,
enough of a relationship where they're willing to have a conversation with you.
yep.
Okay.
And it's like old school networking,
Yeah.
right? I mean, this is what I love about this type of conversation is most of the time when I talk to salespeople, I could say, can you just, close your eyes and remember in one of your sales teams, pick the top sales producer. You got them in mind? Great. What did they do? What made them the top
They
producer?
built relationships.
99 times out of 100.
Yeah.
They they everyone knew them. They'll
Yeah.
say things like that. Everyone knew them. They knew everybody. Everyone loved them. Right? It was just all these
Or they were
comments.
really good at, they really knew our product. The customer really considered them a trusted
Trusted
advisor.
advisor.
Right. Right.
Right.
You'll see those types of
Yeah.
things. Right.
Yeah. And then the question is to be seen as a trusted advisor, what do you have to do?
We have to
You
first
have
build
to
a relationship.
you have to give
Right.
trusted advice,
Right. You have to give trusted
right?
advice. Yes.
Not, hey, we're really good at this. You got 30 minutes for a
Right.
demo.
Right.
So,
So think about all the work that I'm doing trying to get meetings from leads, as we just talked about, which is a one. Well, I may get, I may get a meeting, but the meeting translating into an opportunity might be 1 in 1,000. So maybe I get
right.
1 in 100 turn into a meeting. Okay. And then 1 to 1,000 turn into an opportunity. That's a lot. That's a hard road
Yeah.
to go
Yeah.
down. So if I take that time and work towards building healthy connections,
Hmm.
and let's say I could get 5 healthy connections a day, or 3 healthy connections a day, or even 2 healthy connections a day, how much more valuable that would be than
Hmm.
the
Yeah.
whole lead concept,
Yeah.
lead to
And that,
meeting.
yeah. And so how do we do that? I think is where we want to get to. And Tom and I haven't talked about this, but Tom, I use the term the social two-step to talk about social prospecting. And then I think we go from the social two-step to waltzing them down the yellow brick road. How's that for our model? Does that work
It,
for
it
just
sounds like
making it up on the
sounds like
fly?
there's a bunch of movie stuff embedded in that somewhere. That's all I know.
That's
Right.
right. That's
So,
right.
so
Carson will be proud of us.
yes.
But look, the way that we create healthy connections, and again, to go back to the connections, if we look at the LinkedIn world and we think of connections, for me, we have no connection. Then there's people that we're connected to, like they may have accepted a connection request, cold or otherwise. But then the third category that we should aspire to is healthy connections.
Mhm.
And it takes a little bit longer to create a healthy connection, but oh my gosh, it's so worth it because you've done the work. The people have a high probability of willing to get on the phone with you
Mhm.
and have a chat.
Yep. And even if you were a BDR, right, who your job is to, you know, hand off to an account executive for a meeting. Think about that. If I'm in the BDR and I build even a halfway decent, healthy connection with you, and I say, Brandon, hey, I would like to introduce you to whatever, my colleague or whatever here, you're much more interested to have that or willing to do that,
Right.
right? If it's a healthy connection. And if you're not willing, you'll tell me honestly and you won't just ghost me, right? Which is as much as as big a frustration as just the no, not getting any communication and being ghosted and all of that. I mean, that's one of the most frustrating parts of it. So at least if you're not interested or you're not willing to do that, you'll know and I know and we can move on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the question for everybody is getting down to, okay, well, a question we get asked a lot, right? Okay, well, what do we need to do? And then how much time does it take? And I think that we've got to get to a place of realizing that time is our most important asset. We know that. And the question gets to be now, I think, more and more because of what sales teams are facing when it comes to the traditional outreach is this isn't about how much time does it take. This is about what does this take compared to what you're doing. And all the numbers that you just gave, Tom, I think would make everybody go, I got to talk to 1,000 people to generate one opportunity. And then they should know their data. How many opportunities do you need in order to close a deal? And if it's
yeah,
1 in 3 or 1 in 4 or 1
yeah,
in 5,
yep,
my gosh, that's overwhelming. But
yep.
I think it is. It's looking at what do we need to do as salespeople now, and what tools are available to us in order to create those healthy relationships.
Well, and to kind of wrap up this discussion, right? To me, it's modern selling, modern sellers,
Hmm.
right, are investing their time to build healthy connections and then
Right.
use those healthy connections to turn them into a revenue zone business opportunity, right?
Right.
That's where you're investing your time. The old school model is taking that lead centric sales that we just talked about,
Yeah.
which is inefficient. So, really, the question is, well, how much time am I going to spend on modern selling and how much time am I going to spend on old school selling? Traditional selling. It's really
Yeah.
how do I shift my time from old school selling over to modern selling? That's the right question. How do you make
Because
that happen?
because it's valuable, it's
Right.
more fruitful
Productive. It's
because
right.
productive, right?
That's right.
It's not we've got to get out of this mindset that I know that I've been frustrated with over the last 6 years and talking at social is like, oh, let me it's kind of like the like I joke around the parents that send their kids to Christian schools and say, hey, go get some of that Christianity in you or whatever. And a lot of the sales leaders were like, oh, yeah, yeah, go do some of that social selling stuff. But your KPIs are how many calls did you make? How
Right.
many emails did you send? But, oh,
Right.
yeah, I totally support social selling. Just do it on your own time.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we've got to get out of that because now it's, hey, what's the ROI of these activities versus ROI of those activities?
Yeah.
And I think when people get there, that's when the eyes start going, really? That's
Right.
what the numbers look like.
And we're not like all just into social or online or modern selling because it's an opinion or something that we
Mm-mm.
just think is neat. It's just more effective.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's a better experience for the buyer, which
Yeah.
is a huge advantage as well. It's a more effective process for you from the sales perspective, but it's also a much better experience for the customer and the buyer, which inherently builds brand goodwill and I mean a whole lot of other
Referrals,
referrals, a whole lot
right.
of other benefits.
Repeat buyers. And then when you keep up that trusted advisor
Right,
activity, it increases the renewals and all
right,
that. I mean,
right.
I had somebody sent me a message today that said, hey, Brandon, I think renewal's coming up for us. When do you want to talk about it? And I responded, I said, you know what? I think you're still like 45 days out. Do you want to chat? Do you want it? And he responded, he's like, oh no, I just wanted to make sure like we're renewing. It's already in. I'm just waiting for budget approval. I just wanted to let you know. I'm like, okay, cool.
Yeah,
And Why is that? Well, it's because they're on a engagement list. I comment on their activity
Sure.
a couple times a month, if not more, and they stay top of mind. They
Top of
see
mind.
me as
Yep.
an influential voice.
Yep.
They see me as part of their digital world,
Yep.
and they're not going anywhere.
Yep. And let's face it, it's a lot harder for somebody to churn or to leave somebody that they have some affinity for and they have a relationship for with than somebody that's just a name and they don't know.
Right. And
Right.
it
So,
goes back to that. Close your eyes, think about a sales team you were on. Who was the number one
yeah.
seller?
Yeah.
And what were the characteristics of them?
Yeah.
Everyone liked them. They knew everybody. Everybody knew them. They got all these referrals.
Yeah.
That's all we're doing. We're taking that old traditional networking activities and we're applying it into these digital social tools, and now it's amplified.
Yep. Well, I think that's a good summary of leads versus healthy connections and
I,
and
I
the
think so
differences
too.
and why they're so important.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks for listening. And if you want more information, of course, join us on Modern Seller HQ, where we have more really good information. And we promise not to call you immediately as soon as you log into the community.
Anti pitch slaps. No, 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 no.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.